Good morning. This is retired Pastor Karl Schmidt from Calvary Lutheran Church, a little Lutheran church in Amherst, New York, just north here of Buffalo. Well, we welcome you to our broadcast or internet thingy here on the May 3rd of 2026. Excuse me. This is the fifth Sunday of Easter of 2026, and the text that's appointed for the gospel here is from the Gospel of John, the 15th chapter. Verses 5 through 15. I am the vine, and ye are the branches. He that abides in me, and I in him, the same bring forth much fruit. For without me you can do nothing. If a man abides in me, and he is cast forth as a branch, If a man abides not in me, he is cast forth as a branch, and is withered, and men gather them and throw them in the fire. They are burned up. If you abide in me, and my words in you, you shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done for you. Here it is, my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit, so that you shall be my disciples. As the Father hath loved me, so I have loved you, and continue ye in my love. That's where we're going to end here. This is John 15. We're reading from verse 5 through verse 9, just part of the text. Okay, well, now, oftentimes, Jesus speaks to us and the disciples or crowds or whomever through stories or comparisons, figures of speech. And he does this for a couple reasons. One, it could be that the subject matter that he's describing or talking about is such that we really can't describe it. We just don't have words for it. A lot of the realities of things that he's describing or talking about are much larger than, or much more difficult, or much more complex, or much deeper than anything we could possibly imagine. When he talks about the kingdom of heaven is like, that's you could have a metaphor, a simile. These are all figures of speech, types of comparisons. It's the same in today's text. Secondly, another reason he might speak like this is because he's trying to speak to particular people who really want to listen. And those who are just there to criticize, those who are there to mock him, well, they're going to look at these stories and just dismiss them. But the meaning that's layered in these stories, in these comparisons, are meaningful, but they're not going to see it. Jesus talks about these people. He says, they have ears to hear, but they're not going to hear. They have eyes to see, but they're not going to see. So the text today is about a tree, basically. Now, when I was a little kid, old now, retired 5 years, but when I was a kid and my grandma and grandpa would watch me before I started school, he had several different fruit trees, and he had grafted branches from trees from friends of his. They all kind of did this together. They grafted branches from trees that they liked onto trees that they already had grown in their backyards. And so they could have different kinds of fruit all coming from one tree. Well, that's that's very appropriate to what we're talking about here, where he says, I am the vine, you are the branches. Because, continuing the metaphor, the church, or God's people, is really nothing else than a group or a body of all different kinds of people. As many different kinds of people as there are that God has made. And he makes us, thank heavens, differently. The world would be a very boring, dull place if we all either look the same, behave the same, or, it'd be awful. Instead, God makes everyone unique. And that's partly what's being celebrated here in this text. That the that tree is not just a trunk that goes up to the sky with a single leaf at the top. No. A tree is a trunk that has many branches of many different kinds and shapes and direction. And that's what we have here. This celebration, if you will, of not a tree. I really don't want to continue much longer with this figure of speech, the tree, of God's family. Because church or ecclesia or whatever you want to call it, Greek or English, it doesn't really matter. It really means family, his people. And this is what this text is pointing toward. And leaving the metaphor completely behind, what he's talking about here is his family, his father, and love. And this is something that the world that rejects God is never going to understand. In fact, using the metaphor or figure of speech to speak obliquely is hardly necessary here. Because from my experience, the world it doesn't want any part of God or his ways. You look at the world around us, and I said this for decades now. I put in my 35 years active, and I've been retired and emeritus for over 5 years now. So over 40 years total, and of working as a pastor. And what I've seen is that there's been, I used to say 9 out of 10 churches were going to close. These days I say 19 out of 20 are going to close and have closed. It's kind of funny because if you look around and you see a donut place or a fast food restaurant, 10 to 1, it's on a corner because it's got good access, and 10 to 1, formerly, at some point, there was a church there. Because it just happens that it frees up land that's prime realty. And so donut places and fast food restaurants pick those properties up. Previously, churches built there simply because it was a corner lot that nobody else wanted, and it was unused, and just was easy to put a church there and a little bit of parking. So that's what I've noticed personally is that the great dying off of God's people in this time, this day and age. And this is nothing to do with politics. This is simply the apostasy in our country. And I don't want to talk about trends or, use catchwords. I'm not into that. I don't read that sort of stuff. I'm not even interested in it. What I am interested in is God's family, God's people. And that we find less and less of them in our country here. Now, I can't speak for the rest of the world because I don't live there. In fact, I can't even speak for the whole country because I don't live in the whole country. The Buffalo area is where I've been since 1990. And so to some extent, I can speak on the current condition here in Buffalo. And the church is disappearing. That's should be obvious to. It's not a statistic thing. It's not a subtle thing. It's not subtle at all. Churches are just, they're being demolished left and right, even if nothing's taken their place. Because oftentimes they're in parts of town or places where nobody else wants to put up a business or a house or anything. And so they're just left to fall apart until either the city comes in or some interested party comes in and brings a bulldozer and an excavator, and that's it. Over. But the church isn't about buildings. The church isn't anything like that. The church is really a family. The church is really about God's people. That's what this whole text is about. The tree and the branches. God's people, God's family. And what makes God's family unique? And this is what Jesus is talking about. Him being in us and we being in him. Again, that's comparative speaking. It's a figure of speech. He doesn't mean that we're branches like my grandpa would graft branches into a tree to get, peaches and apricots or whatever, pears or I don't know what he did. It's been too many years. I don't remember. I was a little kid being carried around in his arms. But whatever kind of way he grafted these things and all that, he managed to grow and expand his garden of trees, as well as the garden of fruits and vegetables that he had. And so we look around in today's world and we see the garden dying off. Generations are growing up and being raised that have no interest whatsoever in God or the church. And, having been a pastor for over 40 years, I can tell you something. This is one of those wounds that's self-inflicted. The church really has gone out of its way with bickering and arguing and complaining and small-mindedness and viciousness and its own little politicking in groups, and it's a self-inflicted, at least I can speak of for here where I live and my experience. And this is, it's interesting. For years, I would talk to people and say, if you got a church, if you're looking for a church, we've got one here. And the answer was almost always the same. No, thank you. I've been to a church, or I visited a church, or my parents came from a church, or I grew up in a church, and it was just such a bad experience. I don't want any more of it. Or it's like, well, all they do is condemn everybody. And, they don't want people in their church. They just want their own, club of people, or they only want what they consider to be good people, which is ludicrous. Because I know what they knew, that there are no good people. That is, after all, why we are going to church. Not good people doing God a favor by showing up and singing some little song and praising Him and whatever else and listening to sermons to do God a favor. That's not the idea. It's like the branches telling the trunk and the roots, aren't you lucky we're here? You wouldn't exist without us. No. God is the roots and the trunk, and it's from the roots and the trunk that nutrients and water and minerals and all these things are transported up into the branches and to the leaves. And there, the expectation is that the leaves will do something with this through photosynthesis and all the other processes that make a tree what it is. And it breathes in the carbon dioxide and exhales the oxygen and does so many things. In fact, we're just learning now, actually, that what photosynthesis, the quantum reaction of one photon in, one electron out. I mean, we are just on the cusp of understanding or beginning to understand how any of this even works. But the people, a lot of times, were like, yeah, well, we're doing God a favor by showing up. And I saw this for decades, and this is not the case. And it's not unfortunately, it was the attitude that the church has had, as though there were some kind of sinners that were more acceptable to God, and others that were, oh, God doesn't want you. You're a different kind of sinner. I always looked at that and I thought to myself, as I was listening to these people bickering and complaining and running someone else down, I would think to myself, as pastor, unfortunately, I happen to know what kind of sinner you guys are. I know a lot about you. And I would listen to them as they would, with the purest form of hypocrisies, lambast other people's other kinds of people doing different things, and think to myself, well, you hypocrites. This word comes right from the Greek, upokrites, those who judge surreptitiously, those who say one judgment and really are doing the same thing themselves. And I think to myself, well, yeah, I'm not in a position where I can say anything, but I happen to know from your own mouth that you're the same thing. Oh my. And this is over 40 years experience here. This is so something that I can speak to. And when Jesus talks about this parable, this story, this comparison of his people to a tree and branches, he's looking out over a people that, well, he had stopped talking to them 400 years before. Israel hadn't seen, when Jesus had come, there hadn't been any. Malachi was one of the last of the prophets that came to Israel. And for 400 years, God had simply stopped talking to them. No prophets, no prophecy, no nothing. 400 years. And finally then God sent John the Baptist to be the forerunner of the anointed one, the Messiah, the Christos. By the way, Mashiach, Christos, they mean the same thing. The one who is appointed to a particular important task. And that's Christ. That's where he gets the name, Christos, Christ. Anyways, and so you look at all of this and you think to yourself, well, it's no wonder then that Buffalo, as well as everywhere else, you see the church in massive decline. Church buildings just shuttering up, being abandoned, closing, being bulldozed down. And it makes sense. Why? Because, well, the family no longer lives there. I mean, you have an old abandoned house sitting out in a farm field somewhere, and the family had moved out of it, 60 years ago, and the walls are collapsed, and the roof has come down, and you look at that and you go, well, what's that good for? And nothing. It's good for nothing. And eventually it just gets beaten down by the wind, the rain, the snow, collapsed and degraded. So it's nothing more than an old pile of boards and some maybe rusty old hand-formed nails and not much else. Maybe an old iron stove sticking out of the rubble somewhere, or a chimney. That's what you a lot of times found out in the forest. If you find where a house used to be, there's the remnants of what the chimney used to be. That pile of stones usually last a little longer. But that's what's left of the house when the family moves out. And that's what we have here. The tree has died off. The family has moved out. The branches have withered and died. And that's a shame. Because what God means by all this and the love he has come to share, that's why I ended here on verse 9 of John 15. As the Father hath loved me, so have I loved you. Continue ye in my love. You see, it's all about family and a Father who created this family. And this is God the Father. And by his love, in the first place, he wished to have a family. And so he created, and over untold amounts of time, scientists are guessing somewhere around maybe 14 billion years, something like that. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but if you listen to scientists, they'll tell you that the world and universe are amazingly old and wonderful, and they're just, with all their science, just beginning to understand the mechanisms. In fact, I listened to one who said, we understand less than 5%. And I was thinking to myself, huh? And he went on to explain. He says, we can only measure and describe and evaluate and scan what we can see and touch and feel and the rest. But about 95% of what must be there, what our mathematics tells us and measurements tell us must be there, we can't see or detect or describe. We call it dark because we have no clue. We might as well just call it mystery matter. In fact, that would be a better title than dark. Some people actually think it's dark. Nope, it's just mystery. And so, that's when God made this place for us, when a father's heart designed a place for his children to live, he took extraordinary care and insight and foresight to design and prepare. Humans have only been on this planet for a short while. You look at dinosaurs; they were here hundreds of millions of years, in different shapes and forms. After how many die-offs, catastrophes ended? There were multiple, 6, maybe 5 or 6, something like that, where whole world cultures of species and types of animals died off, and God restarted the whole thing several times, until now we have what we have, the world around us, and it's the place for God's family to live and thrive, not for God's family to bicker and complain against each other. This is like the branches and the trees fighting amongst themselves. It's silly. Of course, you find this in human families as well as God's family. But the real point of what Jesus came to tell us is, and even in his day, he found his children bickering amongst themselves. So that even when he came as the Messiah, as the Mashiach, the Christos, the anointed one of the Father, even when he came, they didn't recognize him. A few, but not many. And so it's the same today. A few, not many. But for those who look here, this is where the Father's heart is to be found. The Father's heart is amazing, because after he had formed us human beings, after he brought us onto this planetary scene that he made for us, that he set for us, kind of like a stage, it didn't go well. It didn't go well at all. And obviously man rejected God. That's not hard to see, or that's not up for debate. God does not come down and walk with man in the garden anymore. If he did, you would have already known about it. You wouldn't need me to tell you. But no, he doesn't. And why? Because he was furious with us, with what we made. He spent, 14 billion years putting this all together, and we came in and we've done what? We have wrecked it in such short order. It's amazing what human beings have done to what God prepared for us, this place he prepared for us to live in. Kind of like an old farmhouse that's been trashed out and filled with garbage and finally burns down. Well, the lakes are awful. You don't want to eat fish out of pretty much anywhere. The plants are dying. The humans are sick. We might be living a little longer than we did previously, but we're sicker than we've ever been. And it's a mess. And so God could just, throw his hands in the air and go, I quit. I walk away from this. Instead, a father's heart doesn't do that with his children. He, out of love, decided to continue to care for us and save us from this mess that we brought upon ourselves. And that's not just environmental or social or economic or whatever, political. Instead it's very different. He saved us from the one thing that was a real calamity, the dissension between ourselves and himself. And I can't begin to describe that for you. You can call it sin, but does that really work? Do you really understand sin? I don't. I've been doing this, I'm 67 years old, been doing it for over 40 years as a professional pastor and retired and all that. But I'll tell you what, I haven't got a clue what sin is. What is this glob of flesh and bone that lives for such a short time? Trees live a lot longer than humans. We're talking about trees here. But what is it that we've done that makes this Almighty God furious? And what is it then that the only remedy, if that's the malady, if that's what's wrong, you could gauge what's wrong by what it takes to fix it. And the only remedy was that he sent his son into this world to be one of us, and then that he die in our place. And not just die, but that the Father's wrath against whatever it is that we've all become, that the Father poured his wrath out on just him. Not us, just him. Just Jesus. And he died. But he rose again from the dead. That's Easter. We just finished Easter. And we're the fifth Sunday after Easter of 2026. And so the Father brought him again as true man and true God, his Son, to life again. And this is where we're heading. Not to doom, not to judgment, not to anger, but to love. A love that resurrects to more love forever with God. That's the whole point of Jesus dying on the cross. Not to end there, but to begin a new thing. And to take us into a world, this world, remade. And we'll live to see it. I'll see you there. Okay, well, this has been retired Pastor Karl Schmidt from Calvary Lutheran Church. We've gone 26 minutes, a little bit long today. So we'll end it right there. Okay, you take care. Bye-bye.